this suggestion which is sort of in the ether of Westminster at the moment, which is this idea that in the first fortnight of their campaign, the Tories are going into overdrive to pulverise the reform vote. So there's this notion that, Rishi Sunak will turn to Labour later in the campaign, but that what he is trying to do now is essentially deal with this kind of, unfortunately for him, kind of immovable obstacle, which is the vote to the right of his party.
Over to the Conservatives now. The latest from Rishi Sunak's campaign is that he wants to scrap so-called Mickey Mouse degree courses. They suggest 1 in 8 existing university places should be binned, and the idea is to free up more cash for apprenticeships. On the front page of this morning's Times, Sunak plans university cuts to boost apprentices. Degrees that don't improve earnings face cull. Education Minister Damien Hinds explained this policy on Times Radio Breakfast earlier.
That when you go to university, you're investing in yourself, but also actually you're investing time, a really, really important time in your young life, that it should be really, really worthwhile. And the independent regulator has already run a lot of this analysis. This is not something, the idea of measuring quality in university courses is not brand new. What we are saying is brand new this morning is we will legislate to guarantee that they can do that, to make absolutely clear they can. And of course, the other thing that's new is setting this.
I'm really struggling with
yardstick.
what is new about this. You're saying there are already lots of good degree courses. There are some which might not be worth young people's time.
Yeah.
The independent regulator already has a system whereby it can deal with some courses that it doesn't feel are up to scratch. But you're going to legislate to guarantee that.
Yes, so I think the first couple
So
of
what
things...
is new?
Hang on, the first couple of things you said, when you said I don't know what's new, I don't think any of the first couple of things you said, I don't think come as a surprise to anybody listening to your programme this morning. But this is a system which has been put in place, the Office for Students, which we have been evolving and improving. And what is new is writing into law that if something is not going to be up to scratch, is not going to be giving young people the value and the experience and the return on their time as well as money, then new people should not be admitted to that course. It's not about taking somebody off a course they're already on, and it's absolutely not about saying to any individual, you can't go to university. It's about saying if there's a course which isn't doing what it should do, isn't providing that opportunity for those young people, then it shouldn't be able to recruit more people onto that course. Now, I think most people listening to this, would find that a reasonable and good approach.
And you know what those courses are, but you won't tell us. Okay.
Well, let's bring in Dr. Luke Sibieta from the Institute for Fiscal Studies. Morning, Luke.
Morning.
So the government says this move could result in a reduction of about 130,000 university places. Will this save the taxpayer money, or are there hidden costs?
So if these students stop doing their courses at any higher education institution, then they could save that kind of money. The trouble is that this is very much a student-led system. So if students don't do some of these courses, if they shut them down, they could just do other courses that universities offer instead. So they could just be transferring onto a different course, say doing business rather than doing a creative arts degree. So in that situation, they wouldn't save any money.
And how transformative could this be in terms of the numbers of apprentices in the economy? How transformative would 130,000 new apprenticeships, if there's a direct read across in terms of the figures, how transformative could it be?
So it's worth looking at the apprenticeship figures on their own and separating it out from these issues on higher education, because there are really, really good returns in terms of higher earnings, higher employment, better life chances prospects from doing higher level apprenticeships. And there have been more people doing them over the last few years. So if the government actually got more people doing a high level apprenticeships, there could be a really good outcome. The trouble is that they haven't really been done by young people so much. Most of the growth in apprenticeships has come from over 25s. It's been more like retraining or adults doing MBAs rather than doing sort of what you might think of engineering or tech apprenticeships.
It's fascinating. And do you think the numbers and the figures that the Conservative Party have put out today add up in terms of the economic impact and the change to the education system?
So they add up in terms of how money could be transferred between the higher education system and the apprenticeship system. It's just the actual doing that is harder in practice than it is on paper. So as I said, it requires young people to actually stop doing higher education courses that they class as low value and not then transfer onto other higher education courses, and instead choose to transfer onto apprenticeship courses. But those apprenticeship courses are also very much student and employer led at the moment. So it requires employers to choose to offer more apprenticeships. It requires students to choose more apprenticeships. And we don't really have a centrally planned system. So moving students from one part of the system to another requires heavy incentivization to make them do that.
Well, Luke Sibieta from the Institute for Fiscal Studies, thank you very much indeed for talking us through the nuts and bolts of that policy announcement from the Conservative Party this morning. Gabriel Pogren, Sunday Times Whitehall editor, is still with me. This is the third eye-catching Tory policy in 4 days. We had national service over the weekend as well. The Conservatives are on a bit of a blitz as well. National service, the triple lock plus, abolishing Mickey Mouse degrees. You know, they've got a pretty packed grid of policy announcements, haven't they?
That's right. I mean, I think that they're trying to do two things here. They're obviously trying to, define the narrative and seize the agenda, destabilise Labour a little bit, try find eye-catching ways to dominate the conversation. And then there is this suggestion, which is sort of in the ether of Westminster at the moment, which is this idea that in the first fortnight of their campaign, the Tories are going into overdrive to pulverise the reform vote. So there's this notion that, Rishi Sunak will turn to Labour later in the campaign, but that what he is trying to do now is essentially deal with this kind of, unfortunately for him, kind of immovable obstacle, which is the vote to the right of his party. Nigel Farage did him a great favour in saying he wouldn't run, which might have been but one of the many considerations informing his decision to go early. But then in terms of policies, it does appear as though he's sort of laser focused at the moment on the on that kind of grumpy dad vote, or at least the not the sort of liberal metropolitan or one nation Tory constituency, but people who, as you've noted, it's generally an older vote who are pro things like national service, who are absolutely worried about the state of pensions, and who might hear the phrase Mickey Mouse degrees and Sunak to ban them and think this is all quite a good idea.
But it's worth saying, all of that notwithstanding, it's a pitch, and it's a very energetic pitch squarely at those voters. The polls we've seen thus far this week, and it is very early, let's not put too much stock in them, don't really show any narrowing of that reform vote. Indeed, they show the reform vote going down. Yes, it may well be working, but Labour's lead extending in all but one of them yesterday. Gabriel Pogren from the Sunday Times, thank you very much indeed for joining us as ever this morning. Bike issues notwithstanding, always great to be joined by you. And I'll speak to you the second I'm off air, no doubt.